Alright guys, welcome back, and we're going to be looking at the last couple of chapters of The Coming Storm. Now, for this section of the book, I want you guys to stick around a little bit after the, the reading of the chapters, just because we're going to give you guys a secret code word that you'll have to email us in order to get your pins and, you know, participate in this part of summer reading. But without any further ado, let's get right into it, okay? Chapter 11. Arabella sat dazed, covered in jewelry. Ropes of pearls, gold chains as thick as her thumb with ruby-encrusted pendants hanging from them, bracelets studded with diamonds and emeralds. A small crown sat on her head, tipped sideways. Normally, she wasn't into such girly things, but this was different. She had never seen so much gold, so many beautiful things, trinkets and baubles everywhere. Goblets made out of carved crystal, pretty little daggers and golden hilts with amethyst pommels, chests overflowing with shiny yellow pieces of eight, statues cast in solid precious metals, dogs and jaguars and gods and birds of paradise. Constance lovingly rubbed up against a carved onyx cat with ruby eyes the size of plums. Jack also draped some of the jewelry over himself. There was just no other way to carry it. All of the trunks and chests had rotted away, spilling their contents onto the ground. Only one thing was good enough to still carry out. To carry out the treasure, and it was already full. All right, that's enough for the first trip, Jack decided, stuffing a few more rings into his pockets. Let's load up, get it to the ship, and come back for the rest later. Tuman laughed, watching John pose with bracelets and a crown. I thought this was going to be un desastre, washing up onto this island, John admitted. What an adventure, what good fortune it has turned out to be. Speaking of fortune, I shall not need my father's fortune now, Fitzwilliam murmured. He held a decorative sword made of pure gold. He can disown me for all I care. I shall return to England as my own man. I can do whatever I want, Arabella said, dreaming of the sort of freedom money could buy her. I could buy my own tavern, or a whole estate and be a lady of leisure. I'm going to get myself some new clothes, John said, and maybe my own ship. And a horse, Tuman added. Now wait a minute, Jack said, interrupting. We'll do nothing with this treasure but finance our great quests. We still have to find the Sword of Cortez. Fitzwilliam and Arabella blinked, slowly remembering why they were there in the first place. What's so great about this sword? Tuman asked. She seems to get a lot of people killed. It has great power, Jack said, eyes glowing. The power to cloud men's minds, the power to conquer empires, the power to forge kingdoms. This power can be ours, but more important, we can keep it out of the hands of the pirates that are searching for it, and maybe even rid ourselves of the pirates of the Caribbean once and for all. Then the seas will be free for us to rule. Everyone stared at him. Um, Jack, that last part, you're a little ambitious there, Arabella said, then smiling, she continued. I'm all for ambition. Agreed. It's a noble cause, Fitzwilliam decided. I completely devote myself and my sword. He looked at the useless golden decorative on one hand. My other sword to avenging my sister. Tuman and John looked at each other. I've worked as a merchant vessel ever since I was a kid. I've been through enough pirate attacks for a lifetime, John said thoughtfully. Sure, why not? Pirates are an evil lot, he said. Then he added, but the power and empire part, I like that too. Beats hauling bananas around, Tuman said, shrugging. Then we're agreed. To the barnacle, Jack declared, grinning. It was all falling into place, the scabbard, the treasure, clues to the sword, and now a loyal crew. They made a strange procession heading back out through the palace. Energized, the six of them marched through the dust and shadows, covered in jewels and carrying even more. The fierce wind in the halls didn't bother them half so much now, except when they had to walk against it with the heavy treasure in their hands. Even the spooky blue light and the rain in the throne room didn't dampen their spirits. Jack took extra care guiding his end of the treasure chest around the throne. Easy now. Don't want to disturb the dead. Hello. What's this? He dropped the chest, causing Fitzwilliam, who was carrying the other half, to fall on his rump. Jack had noticed something he hadn't seen before. He squatted to get a better look at the floor beneath the rope that hung from the ceiling. The footprints Arabella had noticed were very strange indeed. The fellow who took our fabled sword will have a lot of trouble running away with it. Look at this. Everyone gathered round. The prints were only of left feet, as if the man who made them had two of them. Left foot Lewis, Tuman and John shouted. They looked at each other in terror. Arabella blanched. Before they could say any more, a rumble and crackling came from above. The storm had broken a piece of the stony ceiling away. It fell into the crowd of kneeling skeletons. A flood of water poured through the now huge hole in the ceiling, soaking everyone. Constance hissed and yowled and hissed again, shaking herself like a dog. To the barnacle, Jack declared. Are you mad? Arabella said, shaking her hair out. It's a disaster out there. She is right, Fitzwilliam agreed. Let us wait it out in one of the other rooms. Perhaps we shall make a small fire for the night. Well, you lot do what you want then, Jack said, shrugging. He pulled up his sleeves and bent over to pick up the chest as best as he could. All of you may stay here among the crumbling ruins with the skeletons and the falling stones and the fearsome Captain Torrens. I, however, am taking myself, my ship, and this chest of gold and getting out of here. Savvy. Captain Torrens, what on earth are you talking about? Fitzwilliam began. Then he turned and saw the figure standing behind them, tall, very tall, with crazy gray eyes, and very, very angry. To the barnacle, Arabella shouted. Jack rolled his eyes. Fitzwilliam and Tuman together grabbed the other side of the chest, and John grabbed Constance. The six of them ran out, with Torrance right behind them. And Chapter 12. The driving wind and rain grew worse as the crew of the barnacle ran through the palace. It beat down on them through the porous roof. They'd gotten a good head start on Torrance, but for every step they took, the giant only needed one, and he was gaining on them. When they came to the hall with the carved stone floor and the pit hidden underneath, Jack, Fitzwilliam, and Tuman skidded to a halt, barely stopping in time. The trapdoors had closed again, but they all knew what lay underneath them. There's no way we can bring the chest, Jack, Fitzwilliam shouted. We'll have to leave it behind. We'll never be able to walk on the ledges with it. We're not going anywhere without the treasure, Jack shouted back. Torrance came around the far corner, a murderous look in his face. No, look. Arabella tapped at the floor with the golden scepter she was carrying. The traps only work if you're trying to get in, not out. Come on. She picked up the chest and continued running. Torrance was at the far end of the room before the crew left the palace. Jack ran back across the floor. Jack, Arabella called out as the trap opened once more. Jack nimbly leapt onto the edge to rejoin his friends before the trap fully opened. Good luck getting around those narrow ledges, mate, Jack called out to Torrance. Let's go, he barked at the crew. Desperately scrambling, they managed to make it out of the palace and the city, through the jungle, and almost to the barnacle before Fitzwilliam tripped over a driftwood log and dropped the chest. Jack scrambled over the pouring sheets of rain to pick up the fallen coins. The surf was smashing against the shore and beating upon the beach as rain painfully pelted them. The storm was so strong that the crew was being tossed by the wind. John turned, trying to see through the driving rain to look for Torrance. Jack, he yelled, look! He's made his way out of the palace. Torrance stood at the top of a nearby dune, roaring with anger. Over his head, terrible dark clouds spiraled and boiled. Rain was pouring all around him, but not on him. He was completely dry in the eye of the storm. It was finally clear. The storm was following them, because Torrance had been following them. He was the eye of the storm, Jack realized with horror. The storm was coming from the pirate. Give me back the scabbard, boy, or suffer the consequences, Torrance snarled to Jack. What are your plans, mate? Drench me to death? Jack asked, stepping between his friends and the pirate. Torrance growled. As he grew angrier, the winds whipped in even more fiercely around him. Hail suddenly began to pelt Jack's crew. Dock scum, Torrance shouted. If you don't fear me, which you'd be a fool not to, you will no doubt fear the power of the cursed Davy Jones. Jack laughed. Oh, yes, Davy Jones. My fine Tortsey, Davy Jones is only a legend. Torrance also laughed, but it was a brutal, sick laugh. I've met Davy Jones, the giant growled, in the flesh. Consider yourself blessed that you never had dealings with him who collects the souls of sailors and binds them to service before his ship. I was a guest aboard this ship. Maybe you've heard of it, the Flying Dutchman. Arabella, John, Jack, and Tuman all shivered at the name. Aye, the same terrible vessel whose very timbers are cut from the bodies and souls of doomed seamen. And I would have been doomed too, but I was smart. I was able to make a deal with Jones for my freedom. Now I must find the sword of Cortez in its scabbard and bring them to Jones within 1 year's time, or forever be bound to the Dutchman. He branded me just so I wouldn't forget. Torrance ripped open his shirt. Jack's eyes widened. On the pirate's chest, on scarred, blood-red tissue, was the feathered serpent, the same mark as on the scabbard of the sword of Cortez. And here he is, the wild, fruitful encounter that we've been waiting for ever since the beginning of the book. Clearly, Jack is frightened. This mark angered the heathen gods, for they hate Cortez and anything to do with him. Torrance continued, closing his shirt again. They cursed me, rain and storm, wherever I go, worse when I've grown angry. And my dear boy, right now I am very, very angry. There was a blast of thunder. The trees nearest Torrance were ripped out of the ground like weeds by the wind. Hail and rain hit like sharp glass. A static charge like a blanket of lightning covered the pirate's body. Sam's hat flew back from Jack's head, and it was moments before he was able to sweep it up and put it back on. Torrance strode toward the crew, glowing with lightning. The 6 shipmates backed down the beach, unable to look away. There was no way they could get into the Barnacle if it even survived the storm-churned surf. Behind them, the waves were the color of mud, crashing like a barrage of cannonballs upon the shore. Wind whipped a stinging, salty spray onto the crew, burning badly scraped and bruised skin. Jack had to keep blinking to be able to see at all. Torrance continued to move forward, and the crew kept retreating. The pirate was going to force them into the stormy ocean. He was going to drown them. John set one foot backward and yelped when it landed on the surf. A heavy wave struck the crew members' backs. Lightning crackled around Torrance's head. Arabella screamed and grabbed Fitzwilliam's arm. Two men clutched John Constance. Fitzwilliam drew his sword and made sure the others were behind him, but he didn't stop backing away. Only Jack stood his ground defiantly. Dry as firewood in the eye of the storm, Torrance reached for his sword. The air around him still snapped and popped with an electric charge. Jack reached for his hat, which was now sopping wet, the brim filled with rain. Jack took it off and calmly tossed the rainwater at Torrance. There was a crackle and sputtering and hissing and finally a tremendous explosion. Jack was thrown backward. Water and lightning were not a good mix, something most people wouldn't understand for quite some time, but Jack, of course, wasn't most people. Torrance screamed in agony, then he fell to the ground, unconscious, his body smoking. What has happened to him? How could mere water have had such an effect on the devil himself? Fitzwilliam demanded. John and Tuman looked at each other in wonder. Jack just smiled knowingly and mumbled quietly. I told little Benny that trick I showed him with the kite and the key would prove useful someday. Just hope the lad remembers it as he gets older. Might do him some good, too. Look, Arabella shouted, pointing to the shore. The storm was vanishing like vapor. Clouds pulled back and the wind died, and the sun shone brighter than ever. Knocking Torrance unconscious had halted the storm. Miraculously, the Barnacle was still there, listing but still afloat. Jack's decision to anchor just where he did had saved it from sinking. The crew wasted no time heading out. While Arabella stowed the treasure and began bailing water below deck, the 4 boys worked on better securing the mast and sails. Constance walked around the ship, purring as if she owned it. But as they sailed away, gray clouds began gathering again behind them. Torrance must have woken up, Arabella murmured. Isla Esqueletica was under a cover of clouds again, the storm growing black over its beaches and jungle. Another ship was also headed away from the island in the other direction. That must be Torrance's ship, John said. I suppose his crew mutinied. Well, that's it for him, Jack said cheerfully. Torrance is never getting off that island. The seas around it won't calm until his temper does, and we can wager our lives that will never happen. Hear, hear, Arabella said with feeling, raising a silver goblet she'd found in the treasure room. All right then, lads, Jack said, grinning. You, Fitzy, haul up on the mainsail. Arabella, make secure that rigging over there. Tuman, try to figure out where in the blasted Caribbean we are. John, you take the wheel. Where to, Jack? John asked, grinning. Why to left? Why to Left Foot Lewis, of course, Jack said, putting a foot up on the rail and looking out at the sea. He adjusted his hat. And, oh, he added as an afterthought, from now on, please remember, it's Captain Jack Sparrow. The Barnacle sailed on, and the crew was more determined than ever to acquire the sword of Cortez for themselves. It would bring them power and freedom, and now they knew it would also keep them safe. After all, they would be keeping it out of the most dangerous hands on the seven seas, the barnacled claws of the cursed and feared Davy Jones. And here's some leftover from Captain Jack Sparrow, a letter it seems. We'd set sail for the closest port in Antigua to stock up on supplies with Tuman and John navigating and setting our course. Those two really are a pair of excellent sailors. Meantime, we are closing in on the sword. I can feel it. However, I'm sorry to report that unfortunately I've lost my fabulous hat to a trader on the docks of Isla Puerta in a wager over the ability of sea turtles to support human beings in open water. Still, with a ship as merry as the Barnacle and a crew as fierce as mine, I can imagine no obstacle great enough to stand in our way, not even the dreaded Left Foot Lewis. Mayhap the next entry in this captain's log will be the tale of how we finally won the sword of Cortez. Signed, Captain Jack Sparrow. All right, so that is Jack Sparrow, The Coming Storm in its entirety. However, the code word that I was meaning to give you guys, and you guys got to make sure you email it to us, um, is it's actually more of a code phrase, and it is "Shiver Me Timbers." Uh, just like most pirates, you've got to have a phrase, and you've got to email it to us in order to get your sweet, sweet loot. So make sure you guys do that, and I hope you very much enjoyed the book. It definitely ended on a little bit of a cliffhanger. Hopefully, Jack doesn't get, caught by Davy Jones. But yeah, hopefully you guys check out the rest of the series. Bye bye.